What's the best piece of business advice you've ever received?
The best advice I ever received in the business world was compliance never equals excellence.
What's the best use case that you've seen so far for AI from a COO's perspective?
I still think there's a place out there for VAs, but there's a lot of way we can even replace our VAs by creating some good automation, right? So checking emails, answering client questions, things like that, whether it's AI bots on a website or whatever. Those are all great tools. But I really like to look at how can we build something with AI that completely changes the way we do a specific task.
Curious what the role in growth is from an operations perspective.
It's challenging in the fact that we can't affect sales necessarily, right? Everybody here is technically a drain, right?
Yeah, it's a cost center.
On the cost center. So there's only so much we can do in terms of producing revenue.
Who comes first, the generalist or the fractional CMO?
Always the fractional first, because you want to have them be a part of the hiring process too.
So, so the podcast always starts the same way with the question about where you're from. So, Bryan, good to meet you, man. Where are you from?
Yeah, I'm originally from Southern California, and a little outside of LA. But I moved out of there right when I got married, and been in Arizona and here in Utah most recently for the last 7 years. Just needed to get out of LA. Love the sports teams, love the weather, but just needed to get out of LA.
I get it. I get on both accounts, man. I feel like went on vacation there, a couple of years ago, and it was in March, and it's just like Southern California, 75 and nice. It's like, oh man, I kind of get why people like this now. I get why people want to do it. And then also I get like traffic comes out of nowhere, and you're sitting in it. It's like 11:30 on a Tuesday, and all of a sudden you're just sitting in traffic for an hour and a half.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, that's a little different too.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Yeah. Now go back and visit. It's obviously a fun place to visit, but
oh yeah.
Yeah.
You a surfer? You surf?
In another life, yeah, certainly. I used to go to the beach a lot as a kid, but now it's skimboarding and boogie boarding.
Waves are brutal. I'm guessing. Is that what it is? Just like a little, not trying to take a pounding from a wave.
Oh yeah, man. Yeah, plus that water's cold, man.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Get out there.
That is a good point. That changes.
I'm a wimp now. I guess as an old guy.
But it changes as you get older. I feel like you see like kids are out there like they don't even care. Like it does not matter. But yeah, you see some, guys in their 30s and plus, and definitely have wetsuits on, and I would be one of those for sure.
Yeah.
Oh man. So you left California chasing a girl. Is that right?
Yeah.
Okay.
We got married, and we haven't looked back. But it's been this year will be 23 years.
Dude, nice work.
5 kids. It's just chaos in my house at all times, but it's great.
What's the age gap in oldest to youngest?
Yeah. So my youngest is 9, and my oldest is 20.
Oh, so that's a pretty good. I guess 5 kids. That's not a huge delta. I mean,
yeah,
2.5 years change. Yeah. 2 years change. But for you, like that's a pretty big age gap from dealing with like an adult to like a grade schooler. I mean,
it is fun. Yeah, and it's the oldest is we'll figure out what he's going to do, and my second oldest is just about to graduate from high school, and my third just had her sweet 16 yesterday, so that was fun times. And then my little 11-year-old, man, it's great. They're great kids. Yeah,
it's awesome.
All of them are amazing.
I'm terrified of those years. Mike, any advice on that, man?
Not really. Just go for it. Patience.
So,
that would be the only thing, and that's one thing I still got to learn: patience. But
the older kids, what are they up to? They you said one's finished high school, one's 20. Are they heading out to college, or what are they?
Yeah, college, missions, that kind of thing.
Right
so
on.
very, very excited. They're just kind of getting ready to move on to the next phase of life, and the other ones are just trying to get through school. So
is it weird?
Yeah, there's a little bit of an age gap, kind of like an older 3, and then
Okay.
my younger 2. There's a little bit of a space, about 5 years between number 3 and number 4, and so that's created a couple of challenges, but also been kind of fun. A little bit of almost like 2 sets of children. It seems like sometimes, but
get a chance to correct some of the mistakes you made in the first ones, right? And then also make new ones, I'm guessing.
Yes, definitely a better parent to these number 4 and number 5 than I was to number 1, 2, and 3. That's for sure. So patience, I think, is the one lesson you learn the most. So,
yeah, that's true. It's true.
That's great.
I like that, man. All right. So, so you were, how long were you in Arizona for?
Altogether about a dozen years. So when we first got married, went there for a couple of years, and then came up to Utah to finish my degree, and then basically just decided to go back to Arizona. was there for about 10 years, had a really good start to my career there. And then, somewhere along the way, several years into that, I decided to, go back to school, get my MBA,
Nice.
get a professional degree. And, and then just got sick of the weather. I mean, Arizona looks exactly the same 365 days a year. And, it's just so stinking hot there. I mean, we have a lot of family there, so it was obviously, a tough move in that respect. But we really just, we like the four seasons. We like the mountains. And so we just came back to Utah and said, this is where we want to be. So,
I get it. I'm glad you're here. Where'd you do your undergrad at?
BYU.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
What'd you study?
Biology, funny enough. Yeah.
That's cool.
Yeah. It's kind of an interesting story. It was pre-dental, and then kind of just at the last minute, I was like, this just isn't right, And so I was actually accepted to USC Dental School, where my dad went to dental school, and my uncle. And then, for a little bit, taught some high school science, because just trying to figure out what I was going to do between that. And then I got an opportunity to get into business, and it was like everything clicked. I was like, this is where I need to be. So
have you ever regretted it? You ever talked to any dentist friends and you're like,
obviously, like, you think about the lifestyle of most dentists, there's a lot of, some positives there for sure. But there's also some negatives, right? Like, dentist is not there drilling and filling. They're not making any money.
That's true.
Period.
Yeah.
And it's kind of difficult for them, whether they own the practice or not, it's still one of those things where they got to have those cheeks and seats for them to be able to make any money,
Yeah.
And again, there's definitely some positives for sure in working that hard and doing all that. But, looking back, I was really grateful I went back, got my MBA, because that really helped. But, just really it's the real world experience in business that kind of makes the biggest difference.
Totally. How long ago did you finish business school?
2019.
Okay. Been a few years then.
Yeah.
So I have a question about business school. So what are your thoughts on it now? Like if you're giving someone some advice about, hey, you should go, they're like, hey, Bryan, think about going to business school. Do you think it's worth, do you still think the value from the degree is the same as it was 7 years ago? Or do you think it's more or less or changed or just different? I have my own perspective on it for what it's worth, but.
Yeah, it was interesting because like I'd already had like some understanding of like accounting and payroll and things like that before doing my MBA, but like I didn't have a firm grasp on like some of the concepts in finance, right? And so where obviously I know how to read a P&L and a balance sheet, because like, that just comes from, someone going like, here's what you look for, and
sure,
just kind of get some basic pointers on that. But that was probably like the biggest thing, was like eye-opening, like, wow, there's like a whole world of like beyond just the debits and credits of accounting, right? That is opened up when you really dive into finance. So I'd say like in an MBA, like my program anyway, I had several finance classes, but we also had a lot of leadership classes, a lot of things that were focused on, there's some things that I'm not related to, like manufacturing and supply chains and things like that, which those are great. I'm certainly learning about those things, but really I think that world of like, there's just a whole nother world out there, and it's great to see it and be able to see it on paper. And then there's probably so many things I don't even like think about on a daily basis that it just like I learned from just like looking at a P&L and a balance sheet that I didn't have from before. And while I'm not a CFO, I can have those conversations with CFOs and not be like, well, I don't know what you're talking about. You know what I mean? Like, so would I recommend it to people? Sure. Like, absolutely. Go get it. Go get a professional degree. I think that's worth the, the price of admission for sure.
I think there's a lot of truth in what you said, in that it's sometimes hard to quantify like all the things that you get out of a degree or an education, but really like whether you realize it or not, you're pulling from those things every day, all day in your conversations.
Yeah.
And so
it's just baked into the memory now.
100%. Yeah, that's true. That's cool. I like that, man.
Yeah.
So was that like a catalyst for a career change, or what were you doing before business school?
Yeah. So no, I was in business before, and I had an opportunity to get into business, pretty much right out of school. I mean, I did a little bit of teaching for a bit, but when the opportunity came, just like, it was like, oh, this just, clicked for me. Had some great mentors, of course, that really helped, make things happen quickly. And I rose the ranks really quickly early too, which, I learned some important lessons doing that, being so young and not having a lot of background in business. But I was my time in Arizona. I was there at the same company for about 10, 11 years. It was several years into it. I was like, I need to expand my horizons. That's why I decided, okay, well, do I want to look for another job? And I was like, no, maybe not that so much. But then I was like, well, maybe I should expand my, my knowledge. And so that's why I went. And so I actually did a lot of professional training, right? So a lot of courses, the name is escaping me, but a bunch of leadership courses. I can't remember the name of the actual program, but it'll come to me when I'm not on air. But anyway, so I did, I went all over the country, went to several training courses that really were great. And it was like, not like a formal, like, get a degree type courses, but it was like, great practical.
Yeah. There's like the Covey one, there's like Jack Welch leadership. There's any of those things, right? They're all have value. I mean, I really like those things. It's kind of these little bite-sized learning opportunities that you can take. Like, I don't know, I just feel like there's an opportunity to retain a new piece of knowledge or even reinforce something old, like when you're not already, 110% in a textbook all day long, every day. So that's cool. I think there's a lot of value with those. And
this was like, this was in kind of like the mid 2010s, right? When like a lot of, the perspective on a lot of this stuff was really starting to come out. A lot of Simon Sinek things were starting to come out. Like everyone takes what Stephen Covey did, right, and basically repurposes. I mean, I love the 7 Habits. I go over it I reread the book every single year.
Wow, really?
Every single year, like clockwork. And I think there's only one time since I originally read it that I maybe had a 2-year gap, right? But I just constantly reread it because I feel like everything that everyone else does out there is basically taking what he does and just put it in a pretty new bow or something, right? But the realities are there's a lot of great other content out there, and it's good to get some different perspectives. And so I read 7 Habits, lived the 7 Habits, right? And then be a part of like Simon Sinek and some of the stuff he's doing there. And then it was like, I need more, right? I need to actually get in some courses. So that's why I did some leadership courses. Feel like I probably did like, I don't know, 15 classes, 20 classes, and went to on-site, like went to Atlanta, went to Philadelphia, went to all these places, which was great because it was like, well, it wasn't just that it was new curriculum, but it was with new people, right? Different perspectives. And so in my little niche, what I was doing in Arizona, I just got all sorts of different perspectives from different people and from different sources. But then it was around 2016 when I was like, I need more, right? And that's when I went and got my MBA.
Nice.
So it was kind of that next step.
And what was you were with this company for a while? What was that first company you were with?
Client Focus.
Client Focus.
Yeah.
And can you tell me what kind of work they do, and also what your kind of role progression was?
Yeah. So it's great. They are very niche contact center. So most people think contact center and their skin starts crawling, and they're thinking high turnover, and they're thinking, cold calls and all the other stuff. They're not that at all. They have a very niche market with the insurance companies, really just trying to take existing business and get them in front of their insurance agents. So existing clients, and just meet with them, just make sure that everything is going well. Cause like everyone's, you see all those insurance commercials and everyone's just trying to save a buck. Right.
Yeah.
The one that makes me go crazy all the time is that Liberty Mutual one where it's like, just get what you need. It's like, how do you know what you need? Your needs
really good. That's true.
How do you know if you're going to crash into a $200,000, car, or just bump, do a bump on a mailbox, right? You don't know what's going to happen.
Dude, that's true. I was thinking about this the other day when we went to redo our house insurance, and I was like, they think this is the price that it's going to cover to rebuild it. But like, what if it doesn't? You never freaking know. Yeah.
Anyway, so the point is to get in front of your agent, right? And really look at the needs of your family, look at your income, look at things like that. Anyway, so I don't want to get too many details there, but that's basically what they do is it's a very warm call. And it's obviously with existing business. So there's over the existing relationship there. And so when I got there, they were still very small, right? They were still not a lot of number of clients. And also just the outfit was just, part-time college students coming in the evenings, only a couple of full-time admins. I was one of them basically. And so it was like, hey, we're just going to kind of stay in this little comfortable niche, right? But then there was an opportunity for them to really start to grow the company, great relationships with some of the bigger companies. And all of a sudden they exploded, and it was like, whoa, what are we going to do? Right now we have all these full-time people. We need more space. So it really was just one of those things where it was like very, very small, well under $1 million, right, in revenue. And then it was like all of a sudden overnight, it was like things were just going like gangbusters. So,
wow. What was the change there? I mean, you say under $1 million in revenue to then what's gangbusters look like?
over the next I would say it's about 3 years. It went from about $1 million to about $5 million, And
That's pretty fast.
Yeah, it's really fast. So they really expanded. Maybe it was like 3/4. It was probably more like $750,000 to about 3.5, 4 million, something like that. So it was about a 5x.
Still fast.
Yeah, really fast.
5 years, 5x. Yeah.
But basically the relationships were like, it was just like, hey, we would go out. The sales method was very old school, right? It was captive audience. You'd have a room full of like 20 or 30 insurance agents, and you just do a PowerPoint presentation. Like, you're kind of like, whoa, PowerPoint presentation, like seriously. And you just try to do a hard close at the end and see if you can get 3 or 4 guys to sign up, right? And that was like the sales process. Well, the relationship changed where corporate got involved and was like, hey, we'd like to have this be on a mass scale with all of our tens of thousands of agents that we have, right? And so when that happened, it was like, well, you still wanted to go out and rub shoulders with these agents and go to events and things like that. But sitting in front and trying to get 2 or 3 at a time was no longer the model. It was now 30 at a time, 100 at a time that would sign up. And so, yeah, that was where things all of a sudden just started blowing up.
That's cool. And what was your role in that? I mean, as you're moving through, was that your brainchild to work that out, or?
So yeah, so I did some of the sales, but really I was on operations, right? Okay. So I'm definitely one of those people that's comfortable, getting in front of a camera or whatever and doing that where I need to. But I'd much rather let some visionary go stand in front of the microphone and get all the credit. I'm one of those guys that just likes to be behind the scenes and just kind of make everything work. So really, honestly, I did everything else, so I was heading the customer service team. I was heading the call center, and sometimes I had just a call center. Sometimes I just had the customer service team. I sort of pioneered the idea of customer success before it was really a thing. And I have a technical background, so I was running the IT department. It was just kind of all things HR. I mean, just everything, It's one of those wear all the hats.
Wow. How did you get a technical background in the midst of all this? I'm tracking like biology to teaching, and then how did you end up getting into tech?
Well, I've always been just naturally technically inclined. Okay. I built my first computer when I was like 11 years old.
Oh, wow.
Just way back in the Windows 95 days,
Nice.
back in the old school days, even before Windows 95, honestly. But, and so I've just always had a little technical, it's just naturally inclined that way. I'm always one of the first. I had one of those little Windows PDA phones before everyone was using flip phones,
Yeah, man, those were cool. The Windows Assistant.
Yeah.
Or whatever.
Yeah.
They had a name anyway.
Boy, they sure dropped the ball, huh? Because they had the opportunity to be way ahead of the iPhone. I mean, that was 5 years before the iPhone, 6 years. But anyway, so technical background, just because I'm naturally technically inclined, and it was just one of those things where it's like, well, we need someone to manage all our workstations, servers, and networking equipment. So I just learned how to do it.
It's wild.
Just one of those things where I'm like, well, I just got to dig in there. And this was before, like Pluralsight, before Pluralsight even existed.
So you're not even like, there's no training, there's nothing to teach you. You're kind of just figuring it out.
Just finding there's some CDs on how to, do Windows configurations, and so you just learn those basic skills. And this was like, obviously not the early days of the internet, but it was still like, well, you're going to have to search a little bit before you find answers to things. And so I just did, find it out.
And if you spend enough time, I mean, you like get into an old TechNet article or something, and like information's there. They'll explain how to use it, but it takes some effort sometimes because that's cool though. I love that. You're just like, yeah, why not? So you did. So how big were, like, I know you mentioned how there was some ebb and flow with which teams you were running, but like if you were to take into account, like there was the call center and there was HR and there was the sales teams, I think.
And like customers.
Yeah, and customer support. That's what I was. You said you weren't in sales as much. Customer support. Thank you. Like how big are each of these teams, to put it in perspective for?
Yeah, at the peak, I think our absolute peak, the call center was somewhere around 75, 80 people.
That's a good crew by itself.
Very crew by itself. Yeah. And the customer service team probably was somewhere hovering around at 8 or 9 people at any given time. Some of them kind of functioning as a little bit of HR, a little bit customer service. Some people a little more on the front lines with customer service. Some are being a little bit behind the scenes. We never had like VAs or anything from like the Philippines. Or anything. It was all on site. Yeah, it was like way before that. Yeah,
that didn't come around to way longer.
Way before any of that. So we had people answering emails, phone calls, texts. Right as they were starting to come out. Right, it was becoming a thing with business. But
You were pretty early on in the getting messages with text back then.
Yeah. It was very early in the, and we pioneered a call center technology that, like, when we were looking to do it, it was like companies like CenturyLink were like, that's illegal. You can't do that. That's spoofing, and it's like, well, no, we can figure it out. And so we did, and just
Was the technology was to,
it was the dynamic caller ID. Yeah.
Oh,
yeah.
interesting.
So like back in the day, it was like when you couldn't ever display a phone number that wasn't yours.
Mm-hmm.
And so we just said, okay, fine. Then we'll buy a bunch of phone numbers in each market and we'll just display those numbers. And then when they call back, they come back to our main 800 number. Right. And everyone was like, oh, no, that's illegal. You can't do that. And it's like, yeah, we can. So we just built a server that did it and just.
That's wild.
Yeah, it was fun times. Yeah. So smaller customer service team, bigger call center team. Sales team never needed to be that big. It was no more than 3 or 4 guys at any given time, mostly doing kind of just external sales. We had like 1 or 2 occasionally doing some inside sales, but smaller teams.
It's cool. But that's a lot. That's a lot of teams. Even if the teams were big, that's a lot of different areas and responsibilities. I'm starting to see a picture of how your background is lining up with what you're doing today. You mentioned that you guys were really early in the customer success game, and you said you pioneered that at your role. I'm curious, what were your metrics for customer success? Like, how did you come up with those?
Yeah, what we really had to look at was when we first started growing really fast. Unfortunately, I had stepped away from the call center and was mostly working the operations side specifically. So everything else but the call center. We brought in a call center manager, but things fell apart. Okay. Right. So we were losing customers as fast as we were gaining them. And it was just like, in, out, one in, one out. I mean, so at the very beginning, it was just the quality had really dropped. And so what we realized is we needed to get a better relationship with our actual clients. And so this, before customer success was even called that, essentially what I said is, okay, we need to develop an entire program around onboarding them, making sure that they send us the right people to contact, and then consistent follow-up to make sure the program is working right. We also started to integrate the callers themselves to actually communicate with us and with the agent, because it used to be like there was this big dividing line, like the callers never talked to the actual agents.
Oh, really?
Right?
Okay.
The insurance agents, because I don't know,
try to protect their time, or
maybe it was like protect their time. Maybe it was like they're not professional enough. You know what I mean? Like they can only follow a script. And it was this particular call center manager that really downgraded their abilities, right? It really made it like, hey, these guys just aren't capable of doing this. And it's like, well, actually they are. You just gotta give them a chance, right? So we started to integrate, like, hey, we're gonna have this particular caller, only work with X number of agents, right? So they begin to get a much better understanding of their clientele. Because we were starting to call in the South, we were starting to call in the Northeast, we're starting to call in the Great Lakes area. And they're not all like California and Arizona, where like the West Coast has kind of its own culture and the South kind of has its own culture, as everyone knows. So we got people who are kind of regional experts. We also got people who were kind of, hey, I'm only going to work with this like 20 agents. And then that way I get a better understanding of like, where the office is located. Is across the street from the the Circle K or whatever, like get better understanding. And so by doing that, it really improved the quality of the product. And that's what really was the thing so we helped the customers, like they had a much better experience and they were much happier. We also created basically a software as a service for them, a portal for them to be able to log into, be able to track what they're doing a lot better. Before it was just kind of blind. I mean, they literally at the beginning were faxing in like calls, I mean, this is like, mid 2000s, like it's like before all that, new technology now where they don't even have to do anything. It just, their names appear on our list. But back in the day, we literally had people who were transcribing, faxes into, callable lists. And so it was totally blind to them. Right. And so we just made the whole experience just significantly better. And then eventually when that call center manager was gone, I was brought back into the call center to like fix the culture, fix some of the other quality problems we were having. And that's when, we were able to really explode over the next few years, because now we'd bring a new customer in and we'd retain the customer for a much longer time. So there's even customer, I'm still occasionally in contact with that company. And I always ask us, are there certain agents that are still on? And after 20 years, they're still on the service.
Wild. Wow.
Yeah. 15, 20 years.
I mean, that's saying something. That's really saying something. Wow.
And
Even
they're doing
still.
a great job there too, still.
So ultimately though, so you progressed, you ended up landing in the COO role. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. But then you decided you wanted to clean windows. Is that what happened?
But there's a few companies in
All right,
between.
let's talk it through.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I came out to Utah, and there is something in the water here where companies get a little ahead of themselves, and they mismanage funds, and they take large sums of funding and spend it on the wrong things. And so I had a few companies with some bad luck on that front, or some self-made bad luck by the presidents of the company. But no, I spent some time initially, I spent some time with Now CFO. I don't know if you've heard of them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Very, very big company now. And they're a big national brand, fractional work, which obviously planted the seeds for my own fractional practice now. But, worked with them. I worked with a hospitality company that was building up some properties up in Bear Lake, and then most recently the window cleaning company. And yeah, I mean, it's just there's a little bit of a wide variety of experience there, right? Because it's like very much professional services in the call center, right? Professional services with a different type of professional services with Now CFO. Hospitality is just hospitality, retail, and restaurant was what that was, and just completely different right there. I mean, you go from B2B, B2B to all of a sudden B2C, right? And it's like, whoa, it's a completely different arena. But it was great, learn a lot of great lessons there, and then kind of back to that B2C with the window cleaning company. So
on the Now CFO, you mentioned earlier that you're like, I have a conversation with the CFO, but like that's not really where I prefer to be. So what kind of work were you doing at Now CFO?
Well, I was actually in operations.
Okay,
so
still in operations.
So reported directly to the president of the company. My job was initially to come in and get him out of the day to day, right? Because he needed to focus on growing the company. So I was doing all sorts of just daily operations type things, and we had a team. But Now CFO, just quick, they have markets right throughout the country, and so each market has a market president or person who does the sales, and then they have consultants that they work with regionally, right? So locally, I should say. So there was quite a few people outside of corporate, right? Corporate was right there in Murray.
Sure.
I think they've moved since, but they're right there in Murray. And so there was quite a few people there as accounting teams, right? There was sales teams, there was marketing teams, things like that, development teams, because they were working on their own software and things like that. So there was quite a few people right there on site, IT and all that were all on site there.
Got it. So you were not necessarily customer facing, like in the terms of the other fractional.
Definitely behind the scenes. Okay. Yeah. Cause like I wouldn't really talk to any of the clients, right? Cause that was what the local people in each of those groups were doing.
That makes perfect sense.
Yeah.
Okay. So you left them, and then what was it? You said after there you went hospitality, still operations focused, but it was a business to consumer model. Were you tell me a little bit about that. I'm interested. Is it like, were you like at a hotel or in a restaurant, or were you like, was this still back behind the scenes more?
Yeah, definitely still behind the scenes. Like I was not the face of the restaurant, the retail, or the actual. They had a little motel, and they had a few luxury suites as well, and they're building a whole complex.
Okay, nice.
Up there, and I don't know if you've been to Garden City, but beautiful area in the summertime, and it is a frozen wasteland in the wintertime.
I've heard. Strangely,
like actually the lake freezes over.
Yeah.
So didn't this last year because we had such a weird winter, but
yeah, it might like next week though. Because,
I know, because it's all sudden cold again. Yeah, it's so crazy. So yeah, it was really just like. And I worked at the corporate office in Orem, and it was all the way up in Garden City, 3 hours away, right? So I go up there pretty frequently, once or twice a month. I go up there and work with people that are on site. But I was working with the managers who were on site. Okay. So they had a retail, because they had a day spa retail. So that was one manager, and then they had a manager over the restaurant, and then a manager over all the hotel and all that. So the actual Airbnb rentals, short-term rentals. So that was.
That's interesting, man.
Yeah.
That's a bunch of different industries you've been in.
It was like, and that was, I even said when I was talking to them initially, I'm like, I don't know hospitality. You sure you guys want me? And like, oh yeah, we want an outsider's perspective. I'm like, okay.
Yeah. Well, you were, and
You don't get any more outsider than
works.
someone who's never worked in those industries.
I mean, there's something to that though,
Yeah.
like there's value in having a different perspective intrinsically. So I like
It was because really what I wanted to focus on and what I've done from day one till now is my mind, again, why I'm okay with being behind the scenes is because my mind thinks in terms of processes, right? I never want anything to be so process oriented that like a customer service rep says, well, our policy says, right? I can't do that because our policy says. Never want that. But I do want to have structure, right?
Yeah.
And where I really feel like I can help is like everywhere I've been, it's like there's been a founder who's been the bottleneck, who has just been doing too much. And so, and because of that, the company can't scale. Like what they did to get to 1 million or almost 1 million or a couple million, somewhere in that, right around 1 million mark, actually holds them back from getting to 10 or 20 million. And I noticed that with every company I worked with is the founder's like, hey, I'm really good at this thing, right? Or I really love doing this, whatever it is. And I don't want to call them like control freaks because I don't think they all are, right? I think it's a little bit of like really in subconsciously, if you could like, put them on a little couch and find out all their darkest secrets. It's not that they're like, I have to have control. It's more of, I don't have confidence in the systems I built to let somebody else run these particular operations, right? And it's more of like an internal, I guess the word would be like lack of self-confidence there. Like they're a little concerned that what they have built, no one else can scale. And there's always the like, well, I can always do it better myself, right? I can get on the phone and talk to the customer better than anyone else I could train to do. And that may be true. I don't think it is, but it may be true. But what is for sure true is that your company's never going to grow if you're the one still taking the phone calls, right? You're still the one doing this or that or checking emails or whatever it is.
Yeah.
Right. And I'm not even talking about just the very routine tasks. I'm talking about a lot of other things too. And what I noticed in a pattern in every one of these companies is just that the founder's doing too much, working 70 hours a week, or their co-founders working 70 hours a week, or Bob or Susie is working 70 hours a week.
Yeah.
Right. Something relies on a person instead of building a system.
And that's clearly not scalable because you can't replicate Bob, Susie, or the CEO. Yeah.
Right. And not at scale.
Sure.
Right. You could bootstrap it to a couple $1 million, maybe even $5 million. Sure. But after that, it's like it becomes the economy of scale. It doesn't work.
Sure. That makes sense. So this was the problem that they had at the retail organization you worked in. Yeah. And then,
and a little bit at the window cleaning company too, like the founder of the company was still like meeting with the technicians every morning when I got there. Right. And by the way, love him. He's one of my favorite people, right? On the face of the earth. He's one of my favorite people. Kind, gentle man. And I say kind in a good way, right? Like not like that he's a nice guy. Like he's really just genuinely good man. The problem is it was like everything still relied on him. And it was like everybody would still contact him or the manager we had at the time when we got in there. And it was just like no one could think, really think for themselves, so to speak, right? It's just the systems just didn't exist, right? Being able to scale meant you had to just throw an insane amount of manpower at it. And that's where at each company when I got there, it was all like the only way to grow is to throw manpower. There's just more and more manpower.
Which you can do a lot of, right? But it gets expensive.
Well, and your profit margins shrink.
Yeah.
Right. So you want like revenue per employee is a metric that I like to track.
Okay.
And if your revenue per employee is decreasing, well, then that means your net profit is decreasing. Right. So it costs more and more to buy that revenue. And the way it looks is like, a lot of guys are like, hey, I'd rather make $300,000 a year, $400,000 a year, bring that home every year and be making $2 million a year, $3 million of revenue, right? In terms of company, then go get $10 million of revenue and then either bring the same amount home or less, right? It becomes it costs more to basically bring that revenue when you're just throwing people at every problem.
I see. Yeah, that makes sense too. Especially if you're a founder, like a sole founder, like he's like, why would I want to do that? Why do I want to grow? It's going to decrease my paycheck. Is that the angle that you're talking about from a founder's perspective?
Essentially they're like, well, and a lot of them realize that they're like, well, I can't get any bigger. If I get any bigger, then I'm just gonna be working more hours, right?
Yeah.
Or taking less home or both. And AI can only help so much, right? Like we want to be real about where AI is right now. And we want to use it as a tool to help us, but you can't, there's still some certain things that the AI it'll pretend like it knows how to do, but it doesn't actually know how to do it. Right. And we have to build systems that don't rely on people or technology, right? You want to be able to just build a system where you can plug in from and just kind of go from there.
Yeah,
So,
that makes sense. I like that. So what was kind of the catalyst to move from the retail space to
well, I think I mentioned that there's a little bit of a plague here where founders sometimes mismanage funds, and that's what happened, right?
Oh, okay.
So basically the entire staff had to be let go because, he misappropriated funds. $5 million actually. So I'm not sure why he's not behind bars, but that's for another discussion. I don't want to go into there, but the idea definitely is, there was a mass layoff. The company couldn't sustain the losses any longer.
Sure. Okay. And so you were looking and you jumped into, how did you come across this company, Glide?
Yeah, I actually met the founder on LinkedIn.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. And just hit it off there. And then they had a need. They were getting ready to grow. So one of the other co-founders, really, really smart guy, like him a lot. He had been in the door knocking space for a pest control company, and pest control and window cleaning are very similar in structure.
Sure.
Right.
That makes sense. Yeah.
Obviously do completely different things, but the structure of how they grow and how they, all things are very similar. And so he decided, hey, I'm going to try it out for window cleaning. And, my first thought was, isn't that what like little kids do around the neighborhood with like, a spray bottle and, and paper towels. Right. But it's become now this booming industry, right?
Yeah.
It's incredible. And so anyways, he started knocking doors and selling window cleaning, and it was like, wow, this is working. Like, and so he grew it from basically, I don't know, maybe a couple 100,000 in revenue to $1 million, and did it basically just by him and a couple of his buddies just out knocking doors. And it really was just that. I mean, it was just a few guys, and the response was amazing.
Yeah.
Right. And then they realized, well, if we're going to, they realized they could scale that. They could do that in multiple markets. They could do that by bringing in more and more, like they could bring in sales reps of, 30, 40 guys in each market and just really go crush it. When they realized they could scale it, they realized they need somebody to scale it. And so that's where I came in. So
that makes sense. And you scaled it well. I mean,
10X.
Yeah, but that's great. When you joined, did you join as a COO?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. So this is something I was thinking about as I was prepping here is usually when you think about exiting a company or any kind of revenue growth, think about it from a sales perspective, not an operations perspective. So I'm curious to hear what your role was in scaling a business and what the role, let me rephrase this question. I'm curious what the role in growth is from an operations perspective.
It's challenging in the fact that we can't affect sales necessarily, right? Because technically operations is all on the expense side of the balance, or the P&L, right? Where you look at it and go, everybody here is technically a drain, right?
Yeah, it's a cost center.
On the cost center, right?
Sure.
So there's only so much we can do in terms of producing revenue. But what we can do is look at it from a fulfillment perspective, right? It doesn't matter at all if a guy sells the contract one day and we can't fulfill it the next. So one of the things we really had to focus on was efficiency. And one of the things I noticed right off the bat was they were going out in teams of 2, and they would service about $700 of revenue a day, which was low by any standard, right? So first thing we said is, okay, we got to restructure some things, right? First off, we're motivating them to go slow because we were paying them by the hour, right? So they had no motivation to go fast, and they had no motivation for quality because if a customer complained, they do free touch-ups. We would do free touch-ups.
That's more hours for them.
More hours for them.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So they were motivated to go slow and have poor quality just simply by the way we paid them.
And even if they're good people, like not that they're trying to hustle anybody, maybe, but like
no malintent.
Yeah, right. That's just how you're going to work. You're just going to operate.
Wired that way.
Yeah, I get that.
So, and you had guys that, obviously we definitely had some of the wrong guys at the beginning when I first got there too. We detected some time clock fraud and things like that. And it was like guys just, clocking in one place. And so,
I mean, if there's an opportunity for fraud, people find it.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's literally no different than someone sneaking a 20 out of a cash register, right? I mean, it happens, right? So we realized first off, we were motivating them the wrong way, right? So that was one thing. So I'll address that in just a second. And then we realized that every truck was different, right? So number one, not every truck was a truck. That was a problem. We had like SUVs and trucks. And so it was like, and I understand they were being scrappy and it's totally fine. Like I appreciated the fact that they were actually unlike some of the other Utah businesses here, they're actually frugal with their funds, and they didn't have all this, round of funding. They did it all organically. But some of the trucks just needed to be overhauled. We needed to change things. So we looked at the structure of the trucks, and then we also looked at the training. Like we were like, okay, we have these guys that know how to do one technique or another, but we need to be able to use all techniques and be really good at all techniques so that when they get to a location, they can look at it and go, okay, I should use this approach instead of this approach. And on this window, I should do this and this and that. Right. And I don't want to get bored of the details on all
this. This is interesting.
Stuff,
keep going with this. I'm actually really interested in this because keep going.
So anyway, so we looked at those. So from an operational perspective, we look at those three things. And so first thing we did, and this was the biggest jump, was we changed them from hourly to a service-based commission. Right. So essentially how it worked out was they would get a percentage of any job that they did. I think it was somewhere around 25%, right? So they found themselves in a situation where they could do significantly more if they were to go faster.
Sure.
Right? So they'd be able to make more money they were making and generally get done before the end of the day earlier. So these guys, when we got there, they were working from like 8 to 6, right? And they were, so it said 10-hour days, right?
Yeah.
And they were servicing $700 of revenue. Well, then we found out we could get them to service about $2,100 a day in revenue.
Wow.
Right.
3X.
So it's a 3X jump in revenue.
Wow.
Right. So do the math in
Quality
terms of
increases.
So, and we also went from,
That's fascinating.
over the course of the 2 years, we went from about a 15% callback rate with our customers down to a 3% callback rate.
That's amazing.
Right.
And the guys are making more money too.
And they're making more money. And this cost. So the other thing I was going to say is,
That's money.
instead of getting home at 6, they get back at the office at like 2 or 3, sometimes 4 o'clock. Right. So they had shorter days making more money. So they were pumped.
Yeah.
Right. So they were happy. And so we also went to a thing where they, for a while there, they were servicing on their own. Right. So they were going solo, and on going solo, they would do anywhere from $1,000 to $1,500 a day at revenue. But in a duo, they could do anywhere from $1,800 to $2,100 a day. And just because the more jobs, there's a little bit of overhead and things. Then we looked at the trucks too, which is another part of it. And we realized, okay, we don't have standardized equipment. So let's standardize all the equipment. Let's make sure everybody has the exact same equipment, exact same brushes, reels, like everything is all exactly the same. And then even things like we noticed that some guys that were faster than others, like, why is this guy so much faster than everyone else? We get there and he would pull out the hose a certain way. Like he would pull the hose all the way out, and then he'd walk around the house, and then he'd hook up his little water fed pole, and then he would work his way back to the truck and then reel it back in. And other guys, other guys would keep like fighting with it and like trying to pull it as they go around the house, and they'd have to stop, put down the brush, and then they go pull it out a little bit more. And it was like, no. So we trained everyone like, no, you get there, you're going to pull it all the way out, you're going to wrap it all the way around the house, and you're going to hook it up there, and you're going to work your way back. And so we trained everybody, and that saved everybody. And this is the reason why they were getting home sooner, right? It's because it would save everybody like a solid hour a day. And just like something as dumb as pulling out the hose a certain way.
Yeah. But if no one teaches you how to do it, then you don't think of it. You might just be doing it this way. Maybe it worked who knows?
We focused so much on teaching them how to clean the windows. Yeah. We didn't think about all the little things that could help them be more efficient.
Yeah.
And so standardizing the equipment really helped too, because then everybody, like, it wasn't like one truck had one kind of hose, another truck had another kind of hose. And so we get really long hoses, and we'd hook them all up. We mounted everything to the trucks, and so it really helped make sure that they had really standardized equipment and standardized training.
That's cool. How did you find that data? Because like in all your metrics, there's no metric for laying out the hoses, right? Or things like that. Like, was it call time, or how did you identify that in the first place?
So it's one of those things where you look at the KPIs that like, hey, this guy is able to service like something crazy like $1,700 a day by himself.
Wow.
Right. And you're like, how is he doing that? So you just literally get the branch manager or me or both just to go out there and like just watch what he does. Where this other guy over here had similar houses. Like there's no two jobs that are exactly the same, but in similar neighborhoods, the homes are generally the same, things like that. But they're very similar, and he'd like only be able to service like $900 a day. And we'd go in there and just like, yeah, this guy's fighting with the hoses, and he doesn't do certain things that when you get there. How you approach the door, and like when you're in a duo route, like you don't come to the door together. You have one guy go to the door, and the other guy start setting up the equipment, right? And we'd have like some duos where it was like one guy would kind of just sit in the truck and wait until the other guy got back, and it's like no, it's like just get started, hook up the hose, start doing, and it was little things like that where guys are like, they were excited because it was like, oh, cool, we could save ourselves a ton of time.
Yeah, that's awesome, man. And then how do you, after you develop this training, like how did you distribute it to them? Did you like bring everybody in for a training or go on site, or was it like training manual? I mean, what?
Yeah, so that's where I like to really standardize things, right?
Okay,
So when we build a process where it's like, okay, during training, they're going to get X, Y, Z that's going to happen. And then when they get out in the field with their field trainer, they're going to learn this, this, and this. And then when they're on their own, they're going to have regular check-ins, right?
Okay.
So the newer the technician, right, the more frequent they would have in-field assessments by the managers. And so we were able to break bad habits early, and we were able to build good habits early. And so guys were, when I first got there, it was like they would say, oh, they need about 3 months to become a really like decent window washer. We were getting it done in 2-3 weeks, where they were like 2-3 weeks out of training, we could trust them to do pretty good size routes, right? And it was about a month or two out of training when they were doing the same size routes as the guys who've been there for 5 years, right?
That's impressive.
Yeah.
But also, I mean, like, realistically, this is not rocket science. And so it makes sense that you don't need 3 months to do it.
No.
But if you give people 3 months, like, what's the phrase about like the task will expand to meet the space you give it? Do you think you're going to give 3 months to people? They're going to take 3 months and figure it out. Yeah.
Exactly. So anyway, so we laid out a process. We trained to that process. But yeah, of course, we bring people in. We'd say, hey, okay, this is what we're gonna, we had like regular, weekly meetings where we could have little training sessions, and we would at every single weekly meeting we would touch on something that would help with efficiency, things that would help with safety, because obviously OSHA is a big deal when you're climbing on ladders.
Yeah, good
things
point.
like that. And then we would also every week we would touch on some other aspect of the business, or customer service or sales, upsells, things like that. So we just had we took the opportunity on those weekly meetings in each branch. We made sure that everybody had those 3 bits of training every single week. Everything was documented and trained. We had lots of videos, both in the field and in the studio type videos that they would learn from. They had to check those things off before they could get to the next level. So we actually had pay levels, right? So they as they built skills, they got more commission. So they were motivated to get to that next level as quickly as possible because they would make more money. Yeah.
And you're also helping retain, because there are other people out there that are selling it, and maybe someone offer a little extra cash. But if you're giving people career progression, awesome.
Yeah. That's the other thing too, is like before it was like you're a technician for life. That's all you're going to be. And it's like, well, no, now you can be a technician and then get some a little bit leadership skills, work your way into an eventual manager position, right? And so every branch needs an assistant manager and a branch manager, and so we could work your way up to becoming those.
That's awesome, man.
Yeah.
Because those guys, when you're 30 and you got carpal tunnel a little bit, like everyone. I'm just thinking like that's what happened to me sitting in a keyboard. And they think, well, what else can I do? So then maybe they don't want to wash windows in their life. That's cool.
Exactly.
Dude, that's really that makes a lot of sense of how you're able to make that scale. How big was the fleet?
Yeah. When I got there, it was about like 5 or 6 trucks, and when I left, it was like 38, something like that.
Wow.
Yeah. So almost.
But they were all standardized, and with, like you said, with the consistent equipment. Mm-hmm. And what do you build one of those things out with? Like a pressure washer? Like what else goes into?
I had one pressure washer rig per branch, because pressure washing was a different.
Okay, so you pressure wash, but you don't use a pressure washer on the windows.
No. It was like on the house,
on
the house, on the fences, on the driveways, and not everybody wanted it, right?
Sure.
But no, what we did is we had rigs set up where we had like these tanks, and we had the reels mounted to the trucks. That even had its own progression to the point where we started having a rig that was lighter weight that we could actually take out of the truck and bring to the house. Help with water pressure, things like that. Guys hated having to swap the tanks out because they're heavy and things like that. So we found this other method. But at the beginning, it was like mount the tanks, mount the reels, hook the house up, to there. And then, so every truck had like 2 reels, had like 2 tanks, had all the water fed equipment, like all that stuff, ladders up on the ladder rack, down on the actual bed. And then inside we had like we had everything standardized. Every truck had the same equipment. The steel wool, the cleansers, the squeegees, all that kind of stuff, every single rags, all the things they were all like, every truck had, like, they were always in the same spot, right? Like we made sure that, it was very standardized. So if generally guys had the same truck every day,
but if they
switch trucks, one had to have an oil change or something like that. He had to switch trucks for a couple of days. Like it was like, oh, everything's all in the same spots.
Nice.
Right. So
are these, I'm trying to get a view for how big they are. Are you carrying water on them? No. Okay. So you're using house water or regular water and then connecting that, running it through. Okay,
Yeah,
makes
there are
sense.
there are other window cleaning companies even here in Utah that do, get the highly purified water and put it on the truck, and then the guys go around and use that highly purified water. And there are some advantages that way,
Yeah.
but there's some disadvantages too.
It's freaking heavy. You
Yeah.
got to do a custom build out on those trucks. They get huge and expensive. And
Yeah.
that's cool, man. So you scaled it and fast, 1
Yeah.
to 10 in 2 years. There are challenges when you grow that fast, though,
Yeah.
right? I mean,
It's crazy. Looking back, I don't really remember there being anything that really like fell apart, because so when I first got there, I realized, okay, everything relies on this founder, right? Or this manager and this founder together. And, the manager would get, 15, 20 calls from his technicians a day while in the field. It's like, oh, I got to answer this call. Oh, I got to answer this call. He's like, I can never go through a lunch without getting 3 or 4 phone calls. It's like, so I looked at the systems and I was like, here's a laundry list of things that we need to come up with a new system on. And so we did. And then everything, when it scaled, nothing broke.
wow.
Yeah. I mean, if anything did break, it was a minor, and it was back up and running in a day or two, And one of the biggest jumps we made was our first satellite branch, right? And that was here in Utah, but it was up in the Bountiful area. So thankfully it was only like an hour and a half or whatever from the corporate office. And so we learned some lessons from that. Like, okay, we got to make sure we do this different. So then when we opened up the next few branches, it was like, we already know what to do. And
Nice.
it didn't matter that one was in Arizona, one was in Colorado. Like, it didn't matter because it could have been in Timbuktu.
That makes sense.
It didn't matter.
So was that intentionally like a test pilot to do the one branch first and then, okay.
The one satellite branch that was separate from corporate, the idea was, let's learn all these lessons down. And we did. We learned some lessons for sure.
That makes sense. Nail it and scale it. I talked to another founder a little while ago. That was his MO. He said, we like to nail it and scale it. And
That's exactly right.
I like it. It's interesting. It's surprising, Frank. It's surprising that you decided to leave after 2 years. Or how long were you there? I'm sorry.
It was close. It was like 2.5 years.
Okay. Were you just burnt out or?
No, I really needed, like I said, what I realized after a 5X in 3 years, a 10X in 2 years, and seeing the repeated patterns of founders just taking on too much. And one other factor. And the factor is, every time I get to one of these companies, after a couple of years, I'm looking around going, what else? There's nothing else to fix. I fixed everything. Everything's running as a well-oiled machine. I mean, I know that like Client Focus has some great leadership now, but there's some systems that I put in that help today, right?
Nice.
And
it's got to feel good, right?
It
You
does.
look back, you see like that your work is still there. It's like somewhat durable. And
there's people there that have been there for, 10 plus years, right? There's just, I looked at it and said, okay, here's what I've noticed is that, number one, a full-time COO for a company that's less than $10 million is a mistake. It almost doesn't matter the industry, cost-wise. And you can make an argument for fractional CFO, CMO, all the things, same thing. Like under 10 and for sure under 20. Companies that hire a full-time person are paying way too much for that person, right? So let's just take the standard $10 million company that is sitting at, they got good profit. The company is doing well.
they haven't misplaced $5 million.
They haven't misplaced $5 million. Yep, exactly. So they're doing well. They say, okay, we need to hire, let's say they're at $5 or $6 million. We need to hire a full-time COO. I would say don't do that. Now, you could potentially afford $200,000 salary, $150,000 salary. Let's go conservative.
Sure.
$150,000 salary. Now you got to add payroll costs, right? Now you got to add benefits. Now you got to add bonus.
Yeah.
$150,000 flat is probably not enough for that guy. So you're probably talking somewhere between $200,000 and $250,000 a year when you factor all those costs in for that person.
Yeah.
You still look at it and go, I can afford that.
Sure.
We can afford that. We can still do that. I can still make, as a founder, I can still make the money I want to make. I can bring this guy in. The problem is, especially companies under 5 million, but for under 10 million, but for sure under 5, you bring someone in at that rate. You're going to, at the beginning, it's going to be great. They're going to do a lot of cool things. They're going to put in some systems. I'm sure most COOs would do a great job of doing that. The problem is that after a first couple of months, they're going to stop doing strategic stuff on the regular. What's going to happen is the strategic high-level system building type stuff begins to slow down. And now that becomes 15 to 20% of their day. Now you spent $250,000 on this guy, but now because you did that, you can't afford an operations team or multiple operations people, because you got one person doing customer success. You got one person answering the phones. You got maybe a couple of VAs answering emails, right? And you go, okay, but we can't afford them, and we can't afford plus on top of that a $50,000 or $75,000 generalist. We can only have this guy. The problem is that he ends up doing a lot of generalist responsibilities. Starts doing things that you could pay a guy $25,000 or $25 an hour to do, and it ends up becoming 75% of their day. Or their month, or however you want to look at it. But they end up spending the majority of their time doing something that is way below their pay grade. Now, it's not because they don't want to do those things. I mean, most guys probably are like, hey, I don't mind rolling up my sleeves and doing, I'm not above those tasks, right? Some guys are, but most guys are not like, hey, I don't mind doing that, right? Because I'm getting paid pretty well, right? But the reality is that you're essentially wasting those funds and those resources. I would recommend that you're at that point where I can afford, let's say that $250,000 mark, right? You bring in a generalist or two, right? Even if you bring in two, you pay them $50,000 each, right? You got $100,000 right there. You can pay a fractional COO somewhere between $30,000 and $80,000 a year, depending on how much you need them to be on site, how often, is it like a little bit or is it a lot, right? But you're going to be paying them a much smaller amount. Number one, that's all 1099, right? So there's no healthcare costs, there's no payroll costs, right? So you're paying them, let's say $50,000 a year. Okay. You're paying them $50,000 a year, and that is strictly expense, right? You're paying these two guys $50,000 a year. Now you're paying $150K. You're $150K on top of it. And you're going to have a much better situation because now this guy is exclusively doing what he does best. Like in my case, that's what I do best. I do the strategy. I do the scaling. I look at all those types of things. I don't want to be answering emails and doing insurance questions and, doing all the stuff that comes up every single day for a guy who's going to be sitting at a desk in the office. Right. And I could work with these two and I could develop these two. And maybe one of these guys can become an operations manager or a director in the next few years. Right. So I can help develop them. They can become a better. And then what happens is now the company can scale because you've got guys on boots on the ground that can help implement all the things that are happening. And you also have the strategy going on over here to make sure that you have somebody who has all the experience and the know-how and has run across every single problem that they're going to face. So that's the approach I usually take is bring a generalist on, bring a fractional on. And I would do that for all the situations, for marketing, for finance, for all that. It's going to save the company money. It's going to put them in a better situation. And it's going to also lower their risk.
Comes first, the generalist or the fractional CMO?
Always,
COO, I mean.
Always the fractional first.
Okay.
Because you want to have them be a part of the hiring process too. Right.
Yeah, that makes sense.
You want to make sure that if they're going to work together every single day, you bring the fractional on. They're the strategist. So it's no different. And you want to look at most fractionals, especially like they are essentially an employee. Don't listen to IRS. But because they act that way, that's what they're going to, in terms of the strategy. But they have an LLC. It's all legitimate. You can pay them a 1099. There's no problems there. You're not going to get in trouble with the IRS. But the situation
it is tax day yesterday.
Yeah, I know. It's glad
you brought the IRS.
Yeah, you just think about it all the time.
Yeah.
But the idea is you feel comfortable going, okay, I bring this guy in and my risk is significantly lowered because he's a 1099. If I don't like him, he's not producing value, just done, right? Depending on how the structure of the contract is set up. But generally, most guys like me, they just want 3 to 6 months as a commitment to begin with, and then it's month to month.
And look, even if, I'm guessing, you tell me, I've never been on their side of it, but I'm guessing that even if you have a 3 to 6 month commitment, if it's not the right fit, if the client doesn't think it's the right fit, you probably also don't think it's the right fit. You probably don't want us to be there. If it's like, look, we made a mistake, let's move on. Contracts can be changed.
Yeah. And if the contract, let's say it's $5,000 a month or something like that, right? It's like, okay, maybe I have to pay $5,000 and I'm out. Like still the risk is minimal compared to the cost of an employee. Right?
Yeah. Exactly.
Not even close.
If you're hiring someone like that, you might have, like a separation agreement baked into it, all of it. Like, I totally get that.
Yeah.
That makes
and in
sense.
some states like California and Colorado and New York, it's like, it's even harder to let employees go. And the more they make, the harder it is to let them go. Right.
Yeah.
So again, they're not producing value. Like if I don't produce value for a company, then why would they keep me? Right. I have to be producing value for you month after month after month, like high value, strategic value. If I'm not doing that, then I'm not doing my job. Right. So I'm constantly having to be on my game and be super sharp. And they also that means they're getting the absolute best out of that person, right? At all times.
Yeah.
There's never a day off. Right. And then you bring in the generalist together, who comes in and together they start knocking out all these processes.
I like that. So Knowing what you know now, how would you approach Glide now if you were, you know, you're now in the role that you have, clone of Glide shows up. How would you approach that differently now from a fractional perspective?
Yeah, I would definitely say, well, first off, like, yeah, you don't need me full time. Even at I would say even at 5 or 10 million, right? And just go straight into I don't think I would do anything different in terms of the boots on the ground, because there was just right away, we had so many processes that needed to become scalable that were not at the time, that I would say right off, it's just so structurally not a lot different. What I would do is I'd say, don't hire me full time. That's the biggest thing I would do differently, is bring me on fractionally. That's the biggest difference.
Yeah. And so you take the exact same approach. Bring me part-time. Not approach that you did then, your now recommend approach. Bring me on part-time. We'll hire a couple of generalists, cost you about the same. And then the value to them is that they still have you. They still have, in this time, they wouldn't, there's more continuity within the company. I mean, I would assume that, you'd still be on there with the client, but effectively the same results. That makes sense. I like that a lot.
Yeah. It really just comes down to ethically, I want to do what's best for the company. And I think that a lot of times it's sure, you could bring me on and I'll take a $250,000 salary. Sure. Yeah. Fine. But I think we do a disservice to say, as C-suite professionals, we do a disservice to ourselves and the company we work for to not give them the option to go the other way, right? And in some case, there are always going to be companies out there that hey, they really need that person to be strategically on the ground, right? Not every company can be 100% remote all the time.
Sure,
but I think that is very few and far between.
When does the company get big enough? You think that they when does that lever switch when they become, oh yeah, we probably need you full time?
Yeah, I really think it's different for every company, but I will say that there is a moment when the founder kind of looks around and says, everything relies on me, right? That's when I need to bring in somebody, even if it's super part-time at the beginning, where it's hey, I can't afford, 5 or 10 grand a month to pay a fractional, but I can afford, 1,000 or whatever their minimum might be, just to come in and just do some level of beginning to build processes and take them away. So that marks probably somewhere around $1 million.
$1 million for a part-time employee, for a fractional.
For a fractional, super part-time is probably somewhere around $1 million. I like to work with clients that are usually 2 to 3 million to kind of start, just because they can usually rub a couple pennies together. Yeah. I tried to work with one client one time, and he was just under $1 million, and it was just he was nickel and diming everything. And I'm like, listen, I want to help you. I really do. But you're just not going to get as much out of my service if you have me down to such a low rate, right? You're just going to get so little value out of it, right? And I don't blame him, right? I mean, he didn't have great profit margins or anything like that. So he just wasn't quite ready for me, right? Sure. And the company was okay with him where he was at. But it's I do want to get to the point where it's you look at it and say, okay, yeah, it's usually somewhere around 1 to 5 million is kind of that where we really need to get a true C-suite person brought on. So many times the co-founder is the operations guy because he's not the visionary.
Sure. Default becomes the operations guy.
Becomes the operations guy. Sense, and he's the first guy here, so now he's the COO.
Yeah.
But the reality is he's 25, 26 or however old he is. He doesn't know what the heck he's doing.
Yeah.
No offense to those 25, 26-year-olds out there, but the reality is I didn't know what I was doing at 25 or 26, right?
Yeah.
And I had to learn a lot of lessons. And so, yeah, that's where you bring in. Now, if you already have a COO in title, then I'm just a consultant. You don't need to have me be the COO, but I don't want to step on anyone's toes. But yeah, it's somewhere in that neighborhood of $1 million to 5 million is usually where they need to start really looking at. We need some real professionals.
Makes sense. And then you said, I think it depends on when that turns from a fractional to a full-time. Just depends on the company and what's going on.
That's generally around the 15 to 20 million mark, okay. I think, and every company, it could be as early as 10, could be as late as 20, but that's usually when the company should have enough resources to be able to say, okay, this guy is going to do, guy or gal, I don't want to be
person's
going to come in and they're going to be doing nothing but high level. I don't need them to do any of this other $25 an hour stuff.
Yeah.
I have 10 people, 20 people that do that, right? And that's great because those people all have opportunities to become managers, directors, and they can learn under this person's tutelage. That's somewhere around the $15, $20 million.
Makes sense.
Not always. Could be a little later.
Sure.
Just depending on the structure of the company.
Is the model effectively now CFO, but for COOs? Same thing.
Yeah. Yeah. The difference is I don't do anything by hour.
Mhm. It's all retainer based,
Yeah.
project based,
Yep.
or outcome based, I should say.
Yeah. So essentially, it's a retainer unless they want to do it as a project, right? And they want to pay me half up front, half or something later. But generally, it's I don't like to get nitpicky on hours, right?
Yeah.
And if it's like, hey, this week they need me a little more, cool. Don't worry about it. I got it. They need me a little less, cool. Don't worry about it. Let's not quibble over a, because I was at Now CFO, one of the biggest complaints we got was, well, that was 3.75 hours, not 4. And it's like, okay, we'll go down to 3.75. It's like, and it becomes so transactional. And and that's the thing about fractionals that, at least for me, is I never want to be considered transactional, right? That I'm just here to do a certain thing, build a certain thing, and walk out. EOS is a fantastic system, and I use a lot of the features from that.
What's EOS?
EOS is Entrepreneur Operating System. A lot of like smaller businesses use that. They'll like subscribe to it, and sometimes they'll even hire an integrator.
Is it like? Can you give me like a quick version of? I just don't know what it is.
No, you're good. Yeah. So essentially, it's like I don't want to shortchange it.
Sure.
But essentially, it's like a series of like sheets and programs that have like goals and quarterly, weekly goals, and it's a good program. I like it. And I use a lot of that when helping companies begin to build structure around things. My only concern is that sometimes people who come in as an EOS integrator occasionally, and I don't want anybody who's listening who I've talked to think that I think negatively of any of them, because the ones that I have met are fantastic people and they do way more than what the typical system requires. But strictly by the book, right? An EOS integrator comes in, builds a system, walks out. They never test it. They never do accountability. They never realign KPIs. They don't even know if what they did works, right? And so sometimes they'll come in and they actually kind of hurt the fractional COO market a little bit, because they're kind of seen as a operations executive.
Yeah.
But really, they come in, they install a system, which for some companies it's great, some companies it's not. I like EOS and I implement as much as I can. But I also look at Stephen Covey, I look at Vern Harnish's Scaling Up, I look at all these other different systems, and I like to completely customize based on the company's need, right? And I'm not pigeonholed into like, well, I spent all this money becoming an EOS integrator, so I have to do it exactly what EOS says to do. And again, the people I know specifically, they're not like that, but there are some that that they're that way.
I mean, I'd say that's probably like consistent across any technology consultants. If you hire a company to do some sort of implementation, like some of them are going to plan for a maintenance and a testing fee and maintenance and a testing plan and everything associated with it. You're going to do some UAT, all of it, but not everybody. And so I get that.
Anyway, so the point is like, yeah, I don't want to be transactional. So I don't want to be hourly. I can work hourly, but I usually charge an absurd number per hour. So that's like, I could shy that away from that. It's like $400 or $500 an hour, because I don't want to go that route. So just give me a blanket amount and we can work from there. And then other thing is the biggest difference between me and most integrators is that I actually I work with the org chart, the managers, directors, whoever it is that is directly underneath the founder, to ensure that whatever I build actually sticks, right? And we realign KPIs. It's amazing how many companies that the only person who looks at the KPIs is the CEO or like the top line managers.
Yeah.
Can you imagine playing a basketball game where the only people that know the score are the coaches?
Yeah, and frankly, it's like in a lot of organizations I've seen or talked with, it feels like that scoreboard would be covered. Like we're not even giving them access to it. No, they can't see that data. No, you got to give access to
everything.
Yeah,
even financial data.
As much as you can.
Let the company know where the profitability is. I don't know why people hide the P&L so much. It's crazy to me. It's very much a culture destroyer by not being. They don't need to know everything.
Right, secrets don't make friends, as they say, right?
Friends. Yeah. So, but they definitely need to know some key metrics. But anyway, so what we want to make sure is that everybody who touches a process, even if it's the slightest amount, they know what they can do to move the needle. Nice. And then you can create bonuses and incentives around moving that needle, and then everybody's bought in, right? Like it's a natural way to build a healthy, strong culture around a centralized goal, right? And another thing too is too many metrics. So sometimes people have like 40 metrics they look at. It's like, no. Yeah. You want it down to a handful at the most, 2 or 3 at the most. I always look at it as a dashboard. You can look down and instantly and go, can I keep driving or not?
Sure.
Because I can see engine temperature. I can see how much gas I have. I can see how fast I'm going, whatever it is, right? where you want to be able to just quickly look and go, and within 60 to 90 seconds, are we winning this week or are we not? Right. And so like, is this process working? You know, are we retaining customers? Are we, you know, whatever's broken, are we able to see that it's now improving? And that's what the KPIs, they have to be visible to everybody.
Yeah.
So that's another thing I do.
What are the ones you focus on? Are they, I'm guessing they're fairly consistent across the board with different companies?
I mean,
KPI.
Pretty hard to nail it down for every company, but there's always something around, you know, client retention. There's always something around, you know, you know, are we fulfilling at a certain speed, right?
Yeah.
You know, so something along those lines. Most companies have, you know, if it's like a SaaS company or technology company, maybe, you know, a number of users, how many people are using the service completely versus people who are only using like 5% of what we offer, right?
Yeah.
How many people use a CRM go, oh, I didn't know I had that feature.
Oh yeah.
You know what I mean? Like Salesforce's.
Or even,
Yeah,
for sure.
Yeah. So it's like, you know, I want to get my people using, you know, can they use 20% more of the features, right? And so whatever that metric may be, depending upon if it's a technology, if it's a call centers, it's like, you know, calls per hour or appointments per hour or sales per hour or whatever. So you're looking at, you know, just basically the speed at which you're performing. And then like, you know, obviously there's the overall bottom line, you know, are we becoming more or less profitable? Right.
That's the one that, ultimately have to account for, right? Yeah, totally. So I read about your, like the 3 pillars that you have, right? Your the 3-pillar model of SOPs, accountability, and KPIs. And I was just curious. So we're talking about KPIs now. So how do standard operating procedures and accountability, like how does that triangle fit together?
Yeah. So,
or is it I call it a triangle because there are 3 pillars, but it doesn't, however you see it.
I like that actually. A triangle is a great way to look at it because they're all connected.
Okay.
Right. You can't have 2/3 of a triangle and it be an effective triangle. I mean, imagine 2/3 of a pyramid, right? Or whatever, like how you want to look
fall quick.
Fall real quick. And so I look at it in terms of you have to have a system that people are aware of and know what they're supposed to be doing, right? And then I tie that into accountability, right? One of the biggest things that it comes with accountability is everyone immediately goes to the negative connotation of accountability. They think of, oh, it's a trip to the principal's office, right?
Yeah, totally.
Every week, I always joke, it's like when they meet with their manager and it feels like they're in trouble every week, something's wrong, right? Something's very wrong.
Yeah.
So when you build a system and you train to it and you document it and you make sure that everybody is aware of the process, then you build clarity, right? And clarity is the best way to gain true autonomy and accountability. So when someone, and this goes to the culture too, but when someone comes in and they like, you know, looking at the numbers with their manager and they look at it and go, I don't know why I can't get this done, or this isn't working, or week after week, I'm not seeing progress, right? Well, it's because the person's like floundering. They don't know what they're supposed to be doing. You could go ahead and tell them, but you know how it is with language. It's like there's only so much they're going to pick up on, you know, talking head at them, right? So that's why we build a process. We train to that process. We make sure everyone's fully aware of what they're supposed to be doing, and then they're excited to go to their managers to be like, here's what I accomplished this week, as opposed to crap. You know, the numbers are down again this week, but if they're down, you can know why, right? And you can begin to get the support that you need from your manager, right? Because I take that servant leadership approach where it's like really leaders at the top of the organization should be removing obstacles to the path of their success, not bossing people around.
Yeah.
Right. So, hey, here's what you need to do. What do you need from me to be able to make that happen? Right. So build a process, ultimate clarity on accountability, and then KPI ties it all in because then you can see it. I mean, it's crazy when you walk into an organization and not everybody sees the KPIs. It's very similar to a basketball team not knowing what the score of the game is.
Yeah.
And it's very demotivating, right? Because I mean, you're like, am I at 5 points? Am I at 20 points? I mean, you have a general idea, but you if you don't have that scoreboard, it's like, I'm too focused on getting in the chair and playing defense and, passing the ball, right? To even think about where am I at, right? In my score. And sorry, I was good at basketball analogies because I love coaching.
It works. It's a good one. I like it. Let's keep going.
But the reality is when people know what their responsibilities are, the clarity is there, then they get excited about that scoreboard, right? They get excited about those KPIs.
Yeah.
And so it becomes a vicious cycle of downward cycle. It becomes a very positive cycle upward. And every time they meet with their manager, they're more and more excited to be like, this is what I was able to accomplish this week.
I like that.
Yeah.
From a vicious cycle to a virtuous one. I like it. When you look at the metrics, what's the signal for you that a metric is like a valuable metric or a vanity metric?
Yeah, that's a good one. I feel like there are so many, every company is going to have their own version of vanity metrics, but I'll give you one from the call center.
Please.
So, and I love this one because when we realized it, we were like, we are so dumb. Why did we think that this was important? It's a measure of hard work versus a measure of outcome, right? So we had this thing we measured, which was calls per hour and appointments per hour, right? And so like everyone knew appointments per hour was really what we were going for, but the calls per hour was kind of the driving force, right? You could only get so many appointments if you, like, it's a numbers game, right? The number of calls you make, you're going to get a certain number of appointments. And anytime we would do a diagnosis of why they weren't getting a certain number of appointments per hour, we would look at their calls per hour first. We'd say, oh, well, you're only getting X number of calls per hour. Honestly, I've forgotten now what's the metric, but most like, auto dialer call centers per hour, it's like 200-300 calls an hour. This was like, I think at the most like 30 or 40 calls an hour, right?
Okay.
Anyways, but the point is like very first thing we look at if their appointments were low was their calls. And we'd say, well, you just need to get your calls up, right? Or I'm at 20, 25 calls an hour. Okay, we'll get it to 30 and then you should be able to get to your appointments per hour. No problem. Okay, thanks. See ya. Bye. And it was like, what we realized is that if people didn't want to work that day, they would just pick up the phone, they would press the dial, and then as soon as it started ringing, they'd hang up. And then you get a situation where you're like, well, I'm at 50 calls an hour now. And the metric's like, 35 or something. Yeah. And it's like, well, you're working hard. I can't figure out what's, why. And it's like, so this calls per hour became this like, later on we found the games that sometimes they would play, right? But the point is it was totally vanity, right? It didn't matter. Number of calls per hour, yes, it did affect the appointments per hour.
But there's more to it than that.
It's
kind of a red herring. And I mean, it's like,
are you reaching people?
Yeah.
Right? Or is it a certain time of the day that you get more appointments per hour than another time of the day? And so we started looking at, we're like, well, and so our first thought was, it's only in the evenings, right? Mm-hmm. That's people are home from work. This was pre-smartphone. Everybody had, like, this was before everyone even necessarily had cell phones, right? I mean, this was like, 2010-ish, right? Pretty much everyone had a cell phone, but it was like
not as many smartphones,
But everyone still had house phones back then, right?
Yeah.
And so we waited for people to like get home and we call them, right? Well, it turns out that most people really like to answer the phone right before lunch. That was like the time we figured out that people like to answer their phone. And obviously with cell phones, right?
Sure. But they're tired from whatever they're doing. They're like ready to check out and go get some food.
Yeah, it's like 11:30. They're a little hungry. You know, it's like, okay, so we found, and so it's like, wow, so we started looking at like times a day. We started looking at how long they let it ring. We started to figure out, was it house phone versus cell phone? Because that was a thing back then, right? And so there was a lot of things you had to look at to really get a good indication of really what affects the appointments per hour. Because the appointments per hour is what mattered.
Sure.
Right? Because that was what we delivered to our customers. And so, that's one that I like the most, just because it was when it dawned on us, we're like, of course, why are we so dumb?
It's hard, man. And I can see it.
Yeah.
Especially, I mean, it's so much more data probably in the same situation where you'd be able to pick up on something like that, but also, I mean, you deal with what you have. So
yeah,
I get it.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, tell me about executives now.
Yeah. So what we focus on is helping companies scale and grow. The real focus for us is bringing in the opportunity to bring in someone who is a C-suite executive who has the know-how, the industry expertise that your company needs, but do it in a way that is affordable, right? Obviously the fractional, right? So fraction of the cost, but do it in a way where you're not wasting any resources, right? You're essentially going, okay, I need you to come and do this particular thing for me, bring this style of leadership, but do it in a way where you're involved, but don't necessarily need to be here every day. Right. So one of the things that is really important that differentiates us from anyone else out there is really it comes down to we're not going to be transactional. Mm-hmm. We want to come in, we want to partner with the founder or CEO, whatever the situation is for the company at the time, to bring a full solution to whatever it is that they're facing operationally or otherwise. And really the focus is you have some strategic needs and you have some operational needs. Let us come in and take care of the strategic part and then partner with you to bring in someone to actually execute a lot of those things. And then you're getting someone who has 15, 20 years experience in the industry in your type of company, but you don't have to pay them $250,000 a year to do it.
Is it better when the companies know that they have the problem and what the problem is, or is it better when they say, I think we have a problem, but I don't know what it is?
Probably both. Obviously, in that initial conversation, it's great to be able to say, hey, we know we have this fulfillment issue, right? We just, we're losing customers as fast as we're gaining them, or, we can't grow because of X, Y, Z or whatever it is. That always helps, right?
Yeah.
But many times why they don't know what the problem is because they're the problem.
Which that's interesting.
I don't want to be rude, but
yeah, it's hard to see yourself as the problem, especially when you're also, it might be the problem and, a lot of the solution, but,
the thing, and I'll say this is a part of, a part of what Executives Now does is essentially the founder was the solution to every problem when they were bootstrapping it, right? Every single thing revolved around the founder. They were really good at that thing, right? And it's so counterintuitive to go, all of a sudden, I'm now the problem causing these things. And again, it's not an indictment. Like every company that makes it to $1 million is in rarefied air, right? There's very few companies that make it to $1 million. So congratulations. Like that's an incredible accomplishment. But now what you want to do is you want to build systems that aren't 100% dependent upon you, the founder, right? Or some other person, a founder adjacent. And that's the problem that usually is that everything is surrounding that person. So yeah.
Makes sense. Thanks. This is going way back, but earlier you mentioned how you had some mentors early on in your work. And I was curious, how did you go about identifying those mentors?
Yeah.
And if it makes sense, like, do you take the same approach today, or let me rephrase the question. How do you go about identifying mentors today?
Yeah. It's most people think of mentors as somebody who is their boss or their boss's boss or some professor that they worked with at school or something like that. And I'm not really 100% sure how to certainly nail that down, but I will say you look for anybody who can teach you, right? And the reality is we don't know everything, no matter how many, I've been doing executive operations for almost 20 years. There's very few problems that if I were to go into a startup right now that they would be like, wow, shocking. I've never seen that before, right? Yeah. But that doesn't mean I can't learn, right? There's still opportunities to learn. And so, I had an opportunity to work with someone at the later stages of Client Focus. It was brought in to help the company. And it was interesting how like his experience was so different, even though I knew way more about the company, its ins and outs, like all of those types of things. And I was the go-to person, right? It was amazing how when he was brought in, it was like, well, but his experience was in these bigger companies. I mean, he worked for a company, I think Polycom, like just giant, phone companies and totally different than the startup world, right? But there's some things that like immediately I was like, wow, I want to learn from this guy, right? It was just like, I just want to sit at his feet and learn from him because it was just an opportunity to learn from somebody who's been in another part of that arena that I've never been in before. And, one thing is like, I would be so lost at Microsoft or Google or any of these other like companies because they're massive. Right. And I would say like the biggest company I ever worked for was like still like right around 40 million. And that was Executives Now or now CFO, excuse me.
Which is still a big company.
It's
to your
a big
point.
company.
I mean, it's good.
But that's the biggest company I've ever worked for. Some people are like, I haven't worked for a company that was smaller than 100 million. It's like they'd be lost in the startup world.
Yeah,
right?
Totally.
But there's crossover between these big companies and the small companies that can help make it happen. And one of the things that really helps with a guy who's got big company experience to come into a small company is you start to be able to say, okay, there are certain just mindsets that are different, right? That help the company to get bigger.
Yeah.
Like that company I work for in Arizona, they'll never be $100, $200 million company probably, unless they diversify and do something completely different. But they don't have to be that to be on the right trajectory for that, right?
Yeah.
So
makes sense. I like it. Thanks for going there. You mentioned 20 years in executive operations is a lot. You have an impressive career. Something that stood out to me when I was preparing here was that you have a heavy focus on relationships in your work, which if you take it like step really far back from operations, like not necessarily something where you think that relationships have to be there, but you approach it that way. And I like that. I was curious if you could tell me a little bit about why you put such a heavy emphasis on relationships in your work in operations.
Yeah. Again, operations can so many times feel so transactional,
Mhm.
right? Especially when you're like looking at KPIs, you're looking at fulfillment. Like I have to, if it's in e-commerce, I have to get this package out, right? Or whatever.
Yeah.
If it's in restaurants, I got to get this plate out, right? But the reality is everybody who does these things, who works in operations, who are every single day is working in the trenches, so to speak. They're all people who are real people, and everybody thrives best when they feel appreciated, when they feel, dare I say, loved in the workplace. But they feel appreciated, they feel loved, they feel like what they're doing is making a difference, and that they're on a path to becoming more. Even if they have no aspirations of getting into leadership, they still want to gain skills and improve those skills so they can either make more money within that company or take another job down the road that pays them twice as much, right? No matter who you are, what your aspirations are, no one ever wants to just be at the bottom of the totem pole their entire career, right? No one ever wants to be, cleaning bathrooms or whatever their whole career. No offense to housekeepers or anything, but no one wants to be actually cleaning toilets like their whole career. Everyone wants to advance, right? At some point and on some scale. And I think the important part of the relationship side is that whether it's me directly with a founder, or it's me with the frontline employee, or it's me with a manager who's then working with a frontline employee, showing that you care and that you want them to help progress is the absolute pinnacle of a good culture. And with a good culture, you get the results you're looking for, right? And I hate to bring it back to something like results, but the reality is every company will do better and will have a better bottom line if people like being there.
Yeah. And every organization is in existence to achieve something.
Yeah. And ping pong tables and extra money or, fantastic free benefits, things like that. Like those are all fantastic perks.
Sure.
And they can definitely improve the life of an employee. But I always say it all comes down to helping them develop. And that helps them. That helps the company, that helps the customer, shareholders, everybody involved.
I like them. What's the best piece of business advice you've ever received?
Business advice, specifically the best business advice.
It doesn't have to be. Let's change it. What's the best piece of advice you've ever received?
Well, I know I like that. I wanted to think about it for a minute. I think the best advice I ever received in the business world was compliance never equals excellence.
Help me unpack that a little bit.
Yeah. So it's like, and don't get me wrong, like in some industries, like OSHA, like safety, like I'm not saying that. Like obviously we want everyone to be safe and be compliant with things like chemicals and ladders and like, so don't get me wrong there. But what I'm talking about is like, hey, do it this specific way, right? You have to do it this specific way for us to be successful, right? Where it's like the manager is kind of like my way or the highway. And the compliance never equals excellence is basically when you have like someone says, do it my way, right? That's kind of where that comes from. Because the reality is when you give people the ability to think for themselves and you give them like nice principles and patterns. I call a good friend of mine who lives here, really great guy, one of my favorite people. He says there on a freeway, there are white dotted lines and then there are yellow, for the shoulders, right? And then there are guardrails, right? And when we focus so much on the guardrails, right? Like, don't go over that cliff, don't go over that cliff, don't go over a cliff. It's like, that may happen, right? You may be in a situation where people are not going over the guardrail, but they're constantly bumping up into it, right? And what we want to do is we don't want to go outside of those yellow lines for the most part.
Yeah.
Right. But if some sort of crash or something happens in front of you while you're driving, like you may have to swerve into the shoulder to avoid crashing into someone. Right.
Yeah.
And so I always look at it in terms of like and the way he explained it is there's essentially the guard lines and there's the guardrails. And we want to do our best to steer them within those two guard lines, but keep them as far away from the guardrails as we can. And compliance, when you're telling someone you have to do it this specific way or it's not going to work, you're not letting people be able to go from the right lane to the left lane, just sort of like and be able to do their own thing. And really, like everyone really thrives in a situation where they feel like their voice can be heard and their idea can be brought and implemented. And when it's just do it this way, and if you don't like it, just quit, then you just completely squash all of
Yeah, that's a good point.
it. I always live by the example of compliance simply means like not free thinking, right?
Mm,
And all I know is that when I'm in a room with a bunch of like people who are on my team, I want to make sure that I'm not always this. I don't want to be the smartest guy in the room. I
sure.
want to be
Yeah.
surrounded by a lot of really smart people,
Yeah.
right? And let them cook, as the kids say.
Let 'em
You know,
cook. I get that. I mean, you have to have, it can become a point where it's going to stifle innovation
Yeah.
effectively. Yeah,
Yeah.
that makes sense.
Yeah.
I get that. What's the best use case that you've seen so far for AI from a COO's perspective?
Yeah, I love that question because, obviously AI is changing like every day, right? It's like
Yeah.
if you are even a couple weeks behind on AI, you're a couple years behind, right? But I would say a lot of people underutilize AI in terms of, hey, I'm just going to ask it some questions and it's going to give me some answers, and kind of shortchange the surfing the web to find answers process, right? Because back in the day, it was always like, well, I'm going to type in a question and I'm going to go search 7 websites to go see if I can find the information. And well, AI kind of scours that for you and gives you an answer. Well, sometimes it's not always the right answer, by the way. But if we're utilizing AI just to answer some questions, like we have way missed the mark, right? Like there is just so much more to it. And so what I say from an operational perspective is I still think there's a place out there for VAs, but there's a lot of way we can even replace our VAs by creating some good automation, right? So checking emails, answering client questions, things like that, whether it's AI bots on a website or whatever. Those are all great tools. But I really like to look at how can we build something with AI that completely changes the way we do a specific task, right? And yes, we can completely automate it, or we can get it to a point where all someone has to do is check a box and say yes or no, right? And I'm being general on purpose because there's so many use cases that it's like we'd be here for months trying to talk about all the use cases. But I would say as much as possible, let it do the things that number one, can be repetitive and can be repeatable, right? And it doesn't take like some technical genius to be able to tie certain things into certain tools into certain software now. I mean, I'm sure all the main CRMs out there have their own AI tools, but it's very easy to be able to have connectors to be able to do some additional work for you. So I would say as much as possible, like, yeah, I have some expertise in that, but I would say like more than anything, it's like, let's just look at those things and that are scalable and that are repeatable, and let's just completely automate them. Use them as a great tool, not just hey, I'm going to answer some question here and there. Don't ever let it replace your people, because the people connection to your customers, if that gets lost, that you're done for. And that's going to be some of the differences between one company versus another in the future is like, do they have real people still? Like how annoying is it when you're trying to get an answer or something and all you keep getting is the AI bot, right? Yeah. So there has to be that balance, but don't just use it as a chat engine. Use it to actually accomplish something.
Fair enough. So are you of the mindset that, it sounds like you're of the mindset that AI is not necessarily going to replace all jobs in the next, however long. It sounds like you're more along the lines of AI is a tool to be used. It'll help us get where we want to go. And is that kind of where you're landing? Or
I'm landing at the spot where if it's done correctly, AI will replace some jobs. It will. To think that, so I'll give you a real quick example.
Yeah.
When I was coming up with the Executives Now logo, I did not use a designer.
Sure.
Right?
Yeah.
I did not go onto Fiverr or Upwork and go hire somebody $400 or $500, maybe $1,000 to create me all the logos and the assets, right? I did that on AI, right? So that industry, they're going to need to find some way to innovate to keep themselves relevant. Now, is my logo the greatest logo in the history of logos? Probably not. But it was, I was just starting the company out and, funds are tight, right? You don't want to spend, all this money on things. So there's those things. I think there may be a complete replacement of some things on that front. Videos, especially on the like graphics and videos and that type of front. I think that there's a world that, may not exist unless they find a way to make themselves relevant. Right. So it's like, it's either innovate or die in that industry, in my opinion. But there are also some things like, sure, I love the idea of people being able to think more for themselves and do more things with their creativity because they're not stuck, hours a day in a spreadsheet, for example. Right. And now all of a sudden you have somebody who, okay, their main job was to do this one spreadsheet, took a couple hours a day, do this, and, answer emails, whatever, right? Now all of a sudden this part of it's all done. Well, this person can now create and innovate themselves and be able to, contribute to the company. So I think most companies are going to use this opportunity to let the human creativity power emerge and stop letting, like data entry is not a thing anymore. And like spreadsheets, repetitive spreadsheet tasks are no longer going to be a thing because of AI. And I think that's great.
Yeah.
Right. So I don't think it's going to replace all jobs. Obviously plumbers and, HVAC and the actual trades, they're going to be very little, effect on their industry, which is great. I always tell kids, not everyone's got to go to college. Go become a plumber. It's a great trade. 20 years ago, that was looked down upon. Now it's like, you can make a bank. You can make bank. You don't have to go to school. Just go spend a couple years apprenticing, But as far as those repetitive tasks, those types of things, that's where I think it's a good thing, because then it's going to open up creativity, human creativity and ingenuity and innovation. And we're going to see some great things happen because of it.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think the innovation is coming. I'm excited to see where it lands.
Yeah. The next big thing.
Yeah, there's a bunch of them coming, I think. We talked a little bit about this already. Let's say it again, but in summary, how do well-intentioned founders become bottlenecks?
That's a great question. Maybe your best question yet. You really nailed it. So here's the thing. They become the founder they become the bottleneck because at the beginning they are the answer to everything. Mm-hmm. Especially when it's like a solo guy, like he's the only guy, and then he finally adds one employee, then two employees, and finally adds 5 or 10. And it's like, now all of a sudden it's like everyone looks to him or her, right? And it's almost like a rush, an exhilaration to be like that important, right? And the reality is they become that bottleneck because they don't take the time to stop for a minute and build a system, right? And it's mostly because they're going a mile a minute, and they're growing really fast and they're hitting that first million, and it's exhilarating. And it's like, I don't mind working 70 hours a week because, I'm bringing home 300 or 400 grand a year, and I got a great team, and, everything's great. And it's like, and all of a sudden they're a year or two into that, and they're like, I haven't had a vacation in 2 years. I haven't had a day off in 2 years, right? I can't be sick. I just got to go. And so what happens is they don't spend enough time to stop and work on their business to build those systems. If they can stop and do that, they might slow their profits for a minute, but they would then be able to say, okay, I don't have to just throw people at every single thing. I can stop, take care of this, build the system, and then I don't have to be the person to do all that. AI can help, of course. VAs can help. But again, it's still just throwing something at a problem instead of really addressing the problem. Bottom line is we don't want to attack the symptoms. We want to attack the root cause of the problem. And the root cause of the problem with the founder being a bottleneck is that all the systems surround them. Everything comes to them, right? And we need to make it so that they can literally step away for weeks or months at a time, and the business can run on its own. And you can decide whether you want to scale a business or step away from a business as a founder, but you want to be in a situation where you can literally step away for weeks or months at a time, and everything runs smoothly. I think that's what I can bring.
I love that. I think that's great advice. I think that's a really good point. Dude, this has been awesome. I really enjoyed this, and I really enjoyed hearing about your approach and everything about your background and history. And this is great. Thank you. Thanks for coming in and spending the time. And it's great.
Yeah. Thanks for having me. Really appreciate it.
My pleasure, man. Thanks everybody for listening.
Yeah. Thank you.